All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, to the final Building Forward for the year. I'm really excited to have y'all here. You know the drill. It's a 25-minute conversation, starting my timer. And we're just here to talk about reflections of the year and predictions going forward. So I'm going to pull in each of my amazing team members to hear from them. What they learned this year and what they think might happen next year. So with that, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Emily Barony, and I'm the founder and CEO of Visionality. And I'm really excited to introduce our first co-star for the day, Brianne. Brianne, why don't you join me? Hello, my friend. Always showing
Hello.
up right with the bright blue background. Brianne, what did you learn this year?
So I think one of the biggest things I learned this year is a reminder that progress isn't linear. We spent a lot of time working on growing as a company and creating all these steps of defining lanes and jobs and really making big progress and strides forward. And then things happened and all of that kind of flew out the window for a period of time.
And that can be so demoralizing, right? When you're like really on the track and you're starting to like see those milestones get ticked away and then something sets you back. It's just disappointing, but it's totally a fact of life and business and nonprofits.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that we're going backwards and we can't still reach those goals. It just means reprioritizing, and does this mean success now, and how do we use those same goalposts in the future if we need to adjust them. And so a lot of our work just went on pause, and now that we have more staff again, like we can finish the work and keep going forward even more.
I was talking with a colleague of mine recently and her about a setback that I was having professionally. And what she said to me was like, Emily, this is the middle of the story. And that just really hit for me. This is the middle of the story. And I think it's beneficial to have that big zoom back. Well, and I think especially for you and me, Brianne, because we work primarily in the operations side, our big wins are years in the making, right? Like those massive payoffs that we can measure and recognize is from work that we put in years ago. So it can be hard. It's beneficial to take that big step back and to say, look where we were a year ago. And like, it was a million little baby steps that got us here. So it cannot feel like big progress. But like when you take a zoom back, it just feels really
you just kind of have to be able to move between looking at the micro details of what's happening right now and stepping back and looking at the whole picture.
I love it. I love it. Well, what do you think is going to happen next year? What's your grand prediction for 2023?
I think that a lot of organizations are going to find themselves like stepping back into having to look at those big pictures again. And just kind of like as they were, the past couple of years coming out of COVID, like still, this is what happened and how we shifted, and needing to take those back and like redefine success and what that looks like from what they had planned to do and where they are now, and like reroute their path of growth.
Well, and I find that too, sometimes it takes like a big disruption to be a catalyst to shed things that aren't serving you anymore. And like there are things that you're comfortable with and maybe they're quasi working for you, but without like a big shakeup, like you don't have the motivation to shed some things. And so I'm similar to you. I'm looking forward to seeing what Visionality and what other organizations choose to shed going forward as we continue to build out of COVID.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Brianne. Happy holidays. And our next guest star is my colleague, Nico. Nico, good to see you.
Likewise.
Nico, what did you give me just one thing that you learned this year?
Boy, one thing I learned, there's so many. Um, One thing I learned this year that will also serve as my advice for next year is to not be afraid to throw things at the wall and see what sticks and kind of discard things that don't. Um, with a number of my clients, there were um, very like funding needs that sort of came out of nowhere. Like we need to do X before this date, or else Y bad thing will happen. And it's like, okay, well, shoot, you kind of have to drop everything and sort of game plan quickly.
Hmm.
And in that, you can sort of try different things in different, I don't know, communication styles, solicitation styles, whatever you name it, to see what is working and having to be quickly kind of assessing what is working, what it's not, and not be afraid to throw out the things that don't work. That's what I learned this year.
Yeah, just put a lot of stuff out there and maybe like a lot of lower lift things, measure the results, quickly throw out what doesn't work, and duplicate on what is working.
Yeah, and you might even run into a case where you could throw something out and you don't think it's working, and you look in hindsight, well, maybe we should go back to that another time if something similar to this arises. I don't think it's a bad thing to be constantly looking back and kind of, yeah, just always in assessment mode.
Yeah.
um, that's
I,
sort of
I love
the
that,
search
which
one.
just like goes back to your like marching orders, which is like database, database, database. Have a clean database so that you can measure your results. You can track like people's progress of giving and that whole thing. Nico, I know that a handful of times this year, some of your clients had unmet funding needs, and they had to go out to the community and say, like, we're doing all this work, but we have a gap between our program needs and the fundraising that we have. Talk me through like how that feels for an organization, because it's scary to say we don't have enough money to do this work.
Yeah, I think scary is the right way to put it. Might be a little embarrassing just to be like, we are, our mission is to do X and we can't do X because we're missing Y amount of dollars. Like that, it might feel for some like a personal failure, even though it most likely in most, about 98% of cases, it's not a personal failure. But yeah, it can be a little humbling and humiliating to say like we're just not able to do what we want to do or what we need to do because we're missing the funds. Um, but just kind of leading with that sort of honesty, I think, can really resonate with some folks, and people want to help and want to give where they can. So if you say we need help, and you're sure, you can assure people that you're going to do the help, or you're going to do what you say you're going to do with the
Yeah,
help that they're going to give you. People will really respond to that need.
they really do. Well, and we saw so much of that during COVID, where some of our clients, the demand for their programs just like went off the charts. And so I'm hoping that COVID helped some of us get more comfortable saying we have a gap in funding, because it's actually great news. Like our program is so successful that we need to expand it. Like that's a cool thing to say, but it still is it can be a tough message.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be tough to say like, yeah, I think on one hand things are good because the programs we provide are in so in demand that we need more resources. At the same time, like it's also these basic services that we could be providing, more people need them, and that's
Which is sad.
not so much of a good thing. So that's a fine tightrope to walk, and it's easy to fall one side or the other. But again, see what sticks, and some people might respond to message A or message B, but you can kind of, as long as you're constantly assessing and not being afraid to change things on the fly, then I think you should be okay.
Awesome. What great advice. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
of course.
Okay, our next guest star is Llewellyn. Llewellyn, I'm so glad to have you on Building Forward. So tell me what you observed this last year and what your prediction is for the next year.
Yeah, so in 2022, the nature of my work shifted in a really exciting way. And not only was I doing operations for Visionality as I've been doing these past 8 years, but I also really got into a driver's seat on client work. And so my observation comes from both of those seats, and it's about hiring. So it's about the fact that the Great Resignation has really shaken up the situation for hiring in the nonprofit field. And as we all know, one of the factors that plays really heavily into the Great Resignation is people who are leaving their jobs because they're looking for more meaningful work. Well, if you're looking for more meaningful work, where do you turn? You turn to the nonprofit sector. But the difference is that I think candidates who have been in that journey of looking for more meaningful work in the nonprofit sector are not, this time compared to the past, are not accepting of a lower wage. So they're bringing that into the negotiations, and it's causing a shakeup in what nonprofits need to pay in order to make good hires.
It's so interesting. I was at an event last night, actually, and I was talking to somebody, and I shared, we're so excited. We just brought on 3 new staff members, and I don't remember what the question was, but I was like, well, yeah, a lot of people are just changing jobs. They're changing jobs, and he's like, well, what did you do to like attract people? And I was like, well, I compensate them fairly. I treat them kindly. And by the way, we bumped up our vacation accrual. We bumped up our paid days off. We're closing our office over the holidays. And he was like, perks. I said, perks. And he's like, that works? Yes, that works. But the basis is that you have to be in the same ballpark on compensation. Like what you said is exactly right. No longer are people willing to make a fraction because they're doing good work.
Yeah, it feels like a redefinition of perks to requirements. Requirements, or
Yeah.
else there's no conversation to be had on that negotiating table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Any other predictions for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I really think that this is going to, and I will say that it's a prediction that's really tied with a hope for me, is that I hope that the reality of these hiring processes that have led to these conversations between candidates and hiring managers is going to trickle more and more and more into the boardrooms and bring validity to the conversation about competitive wages for nonprofit employees. And my prediction and hope is that at every level in that conversation, people are going to step up. That board members are going to be open to that conversation, that leadership is going to present this information to boards in a savvy way that speaks board language, talks about return on investment, it quantifies what it takes to turn over an employee versus actually recruit and retain the ones that you have. Mm-hmm. And this is maybe the hardest one of all. I really hope that nonprofit staff members who have chosen a career of service like that will own their value and be brave to ask for the wages that they deserve, and not, even if they entered the nonprofit service 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that they will still be brave in joining the conversation and saying, yes, I am worth it. I deserve competitive wages.
Yeah, so that's a phenomenon called wage compression, where someone who entered years ago, maybe when the pay brackets were lower, and maybe has just gotten incremental raises, but then all of a sudden, now that the standards are higher, someone comes in at a higher rate than somebody who has tenure at the organization. And so, yeah, it can be really a tough moment to say, like, we've got this amazing candidate that we want to offer a job to, but what must come with that is to adjust other people's wages accordingly and account for their tenure at the organization. It can be a tough conversation, but it's equity.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up with just one other factor playing into this. As of January 1st, organizations with 5 or more employees are required to post their salary ranges on their job descriptions. Hopefully your organization has already been doing that regardless of your size, because that's the right thing to do, to have an honest starting point with your employees. But that's going to add to this conversation about wage compression. If all of a sudden you are in an organization where employees have not had that awareness about salaries with their colleagues, and you want to get ahead of that, and you do not want to alienate the employees that have worked with you for a long time.
Well, and that can be a challenge, because you can, bring people up to the sort of new wage band, but then there are further opportunities to reward tenure. Maybe it's a one-time thank you bonus, maybe it's greater vacation accrual, great, like, priority on professional development opportunities. But there does need to be this recognition beyond, we're going to bring everyone into the same ballpark, but also to make good on the investment that employee has made, just to make everyone feel a little better.
Yeah, and do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
Be kind.
Be kind. Thank you so much, Llewellyn. Okay, our next guest star is my colleague, Delaney. Delaney, I'm so glad to have you. What did you learn this year?
Well, mine actually fits in with pretty much the conversation so far. I learned about the massive importance of adaptability. So I started a Visionality in mid-August, and you guys were in the middle of a pretty big transition and trying to hire 3 new people. And onboarding is already always such a big undertaking. So with that transition, it was like even more massive. But despite that, like, the team really came together. Everyone was really able to work together. We were able to lean into each other and count on each other. Everyone was like handed off. We were handing projects kind of back and forth. We did what we needed to do. And everyone trusted each other to get done what needed to get done, which was awesome for me, because the last couple of years I've spent as a contractor just working on my own, which, I've been able to adapt to different teams in that way, but it was nice to be a part of a team for like a longer period of time and see how these projects play out, not just like jump in, okay, I'm done, leave. So it was really nice. Like, teamwork and adaptability have been huge for me this year.
I love it. Well, and it is tricky too, because when a new team member comes in, there is a loss of productivity, right? Because the newbie needs to maybe learn the tools, or learn the voice of the client, or learn the workflow or personalities of the organization or the client, or whatever. And so that brief reduction in productivity can sometimes be so uncomfortable that you just circumvent it, right? And you don't give our newbies the opportunity to come up to speed. And like, I know that in the moment it can feel like the right choice, like, oh, I'll just do this myself, but that actually does such a disservice to the new person coming on, but also the team as a whole. Like, we all need the opportunity to learn and to come into an organization.
Yeah, there's definitely a balance there's like a fine line to walk, because I've come into places where they've given me something to work on and very little direction, and they're not there to answer questions. And then I've come into places where, they don't want to hand things off. And it does have to be somewhere in the middle there, because you need to be able to trust the person that they can take the job, and they'll ask the questions that need to be asked when they have them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's your prediction for next year?
So I think that this is going to be a huge drive in hiring, this flexibility and adaptability on for both the candidates and the organizations. So I think that the organizations are going to have to identify the adaptability that they possess or don't possess, and either work together to grow that like teamwork, adaptability, process. And for employees, they need to really look at projects that they've worked on that they've been able to use that and market that effectively, because it's going to be, with like Llewellyn was talking about, the Great Resignation, there is going to be a lot of transition. It already has started happening, and it's going to continue. So people are going to have to step in where they're needed.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So now it's your turn, Emily. I
Okay.
know this year's been nothing but adapting to the situation. There's been a lot of transition. So what have you learned?
Yes, so I'm just going to piggyback right off of what you were talking about, and I'm so glad that it's you and I having this conversation, because the primary driver for us bringing you in-house, right, because you were one of our like trusted partners, helping us with a lot of projects over a number of years, and we asked you to come in-house as an employee because one of our employees, Taryn, had a baby, and so we in order to adapt to this changing situation that yippee skippy, our employee's gonna be out for a while to have a baby, we adapted and we made this big change and we brought you in-house. We brought you in-house really early because we didn't want, we just needed it to be tight. We needed you to be fully up to speed when Taryn went out on maternity. And then what happened, Delaney?
She went on maternity a week early.
And so I just think that doubles down on like adaptability, but also just like embracing that things are not going to be perfect, and leading with an adaptive mindset makes things not being perfect like not scary anymore, because it's so much less about like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, to we can figure anything out. Like, I don't know what the next challenge is, but I know that this is the right team to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's been your motto a lot through just making Visionality work.
Yeah, just figure it out. Just figure it out.
So how do you think that's going to move forward into next year?
Yeah, I agree with you that staff is going to continue to turn over. We need to destigmatize what it means for the employer when a staff member takes a different job. It doesn't mean that you are a bad employer or your company is a bad company. People move jobs for many different, very positive reasons. And so that was a lesson that I continue to try to learn and accept, that, people change jobs for incredible reasons. And one big learning moment for me this year was changing the way that I saw transition. We had 2 very key staff members take other opportunities this year, and I continue to work really hard to see that as a celebration of them and of movement in their careers. And so we created this term called graduating an employee. And what I've heard is when you are leaving a job, your last few days feel like your funeral. It just feels really weird. Everyone's talking about you like you're not there. And so we decided to turn it into a graduation party. And it was really fun. So that's my hope that I'm putting into the universe for next year, is that we destigmatize turnover. We de-vilify our employees when they take their next great opportunity, and instead celebrate it, because whatever I did as an employer built them and supported them to to be able to say yes to their next big step.
Yeah, I love that. See, and that goes back to the beginning when you were talking about the middle of the story. Like, this was the middle of their story.
It's the middle
And
of our
that's fine.
story. I love it. Thank you so much, Delaney.
Yeah, thank you.
So now it is my great pleasure to introduce our 3 team of newbies. That's what we have coined them, our newbies. So Visionality took a really big leap forward, and we hired 3 new employees. We went from a team of 6 to a team of 9, which is a big jump. So I would love to actually invite all of our newbies onto the screen and first introduce you, but then also give you an opportunity to share what your hopes are for next year. So please join me. Katie, I see you first. So you're on deck, everyone. This is our brand new colleague, Katie. We're so glad to have you. What's your hope? What's your prediction for next year?
I think as we're like truly navigating out of COVID right now, I'm really looking forward to making like long-term fundraising plans for people now that we have a little bit more stability and things are longer lasting. Because we've been in this time of just like flexibility, adapting, canceling things, trying something new. But I feel like we're getting back to a point where we can do something sustainable and really work with what we are now calling the new normal.
Yes, love it. Love it. Thank you so much. All right, Jeanette, it's your turn. Everyone, please meet Jeanette. What is your hope? What is your prediction for next year?
Well, my hope is that with this big change in my life, that I'm going to bring together my personal and professional goals together to live a really balanced, good life. And I've resonated with everything that our team members have said, that it's work that matters. It's making decisions for your life based on your own values, and that the knowledge that we have control over our lives and we can make changes for the positive. And so I'm really looking forward to being my best professionally and giving back and sharing what I know with other team members, and also learning so much, which I've already done, learned so much from all of you, and then being good to myself.
I love that so much. And it echoes, Angela and I had a meeting just before this, sort of like how COVID and working from home and doing all this Zoom has sort of humanized all of us. Like, we all have pets or families or a bad hair day or whatever. And so I love what you said about sort of leaning into having an integrated life. You don't have a work Jeanette and a home Jeanette. You have Jeanette, and all pieces of Jeanette need to work together for you to be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Thank you so much. Oh, one more thought. Yeah.
I'm excited about strategic planning, because what you have all said about post-COVID, I think strategic planning is going to end up changing a bit. I'm excited to see how it affects our organizational values of our clients. And I think the surveys and questioning that we do is going to bring back more interesting. And I'm really interested to see how our strategic planning is going to change and evolve post-COVID.
I am too. Yeah. Angela, it's your turn. What are your predictions for 2023?
So my prediction is really just looking forward to bringing people together. That's the core of who I am, is bringing people together, being resourceful with Visionality or the different boards I serve on and different committees, and really bringing people together, strengthen the community as a whole. And while doing that, entering a year full of gratitude. I'm grateful that we live on this, Tri-County area, this county that's amazing, Ventura County and Santa Barbara, that are beautiful, and we're very fortunate. So I'm just going into the year with a lot of gratitude.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And you guys, we're so glad to have you on the team. Couldn't have come a moment too soon. And I can't wait to see what we all get to do together next year. Thank you all very much. So I want to, as we always do, open it up to anybody else who might want to hop on camera or just unmute yourself and let me know what predictions you have for 2023 or what's a big surprising lesson that you learned this year. I normally put a filler question in here so that we don't have an awkward silence. So someone, maybe we have nothing, and that's okay too. So Happy New Year. We did it. It was a tough one, but it was a good one. And I'm looking forward to seeing y'all in the new year. So see ya.